Hello, faithful, and welcome to the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most subjective 49ers discussion and analysis. And today we're going to be discussing the firings of special teams coordinator Brian Schneider and defensive coordinator Nick Sorensen. We're going to be going over some stats for each, discussing how bad the Niners defense actually was, some defensive coordinator options. I'll discuss why I really don't think Robert Saleh is an option for this team. We're going to discuss, is it a personnel issue on defense? Then we're going to transition to the offense, talk about Brock and his extension, what he had to say about that. And the Niners signed more than a dozen players to future contracts. I'll list that with a couple interesting signings that I want to share. So let's jump, right into it. We knew the Brian Schneider firing was coming. It happened on Monday. I'm recording this on Thursday. He's gone. Foregone conclusion, the way the special teams was being handled for the past couple seasons, but specifically this season, how bad the kick return, punt return coverages are. The punt return unit, Jacob Cowing, tried to give it a little bit of life and a little bit of juice. Totally okay. The only time where either punt or kick returns looked adequate was when Debo was returning it, and that's basically a no-brainer move when you have someone as athletically talented and with the vision that Debo has returning kicks. How sustainable that is over 17 games, I'm not sure. It's probably more sustainable than we think, considering how often the ball ends up in or out of the end zone for a touchback. And with Debo on the last year of his contract, if he's not traded or released in the offseason post June 1st, it may be one of your typical Kyle running somebody into the ground type of things. But if Debo's your best option and he returns, 3 kickoffs a game and the other 3 or 4 end up being touchbacks, I don't think that's the end of the world in terms of wear and tear on somebody's body. Now, last game of the season at Arizona, a 47-24 loss, which guaranteed San Francisco the 11th overall draft pick in April's draft. Just from a special team standpoint, it was a microcosm of the Niners season. Missed field goal by Jake Moody. They allowed a fake punt by Arizona. It's not like either one of those gains or stops would have changed the outcome of the game. That was really a Nick Sorensen special. We'll get into that in a moment. Jake Moody, 70% on the year, not nearly good enough. Significant step down from last season. He was 11 of 20 on field goals coming back from the injury. And if anyone wants to say or defend him that, and I don't think anybody really out there wants to, that the ankle was an issue, then he should not have been on the field. You can find a kicker that would have done better than 11 for 20 since Moody came back from the injury. Is it a holding issue? People were making comments about Pat O'Donnell when he was brought in as the punter. Was he not holding it, spinning it the correct way for Moody? I don't know. I don't care. Jake Moody looks emotionally broken. The only question is, will Moody be released outright at some point before the league year starts, beginning/mid-March, or sometime thereafter? They're definitely, at the least, right? They're going to bring in an undrafted rookie free agent kicker. Maybe they draft a kicker in the 7th round. They have multiple 7th round picks, and potentially someone, a veteran, in free agency and have them duke it out. But I just can't imagine Moody being on the team to start week 1, September 2025. Once he misses a kick, especially at home, the boos are going to rain down on him. I think his time is over. Jake Moody was not the reason why the Niners went 6-11. I mean, he had a hand in probably the Rams loss. If he makes that 50-plus yard field goal, it's a 10-point lead week 3, and they probably win that game. But I don't think his losses really, or his misses really, would have affected anything significantly thereafter. There's a question, is the personnel good enough on special teams? I mean, Brian Schneider was a special teams coordinator for Seattle for 10 years, and he had multiple top 10 units working for Pete Carroll. Now, your special teams personnel are generally your backups. Some linemen, some D linemen, your backup linebackers, backup cornerbacks, backup safeties. They signed George Odom to an extension, basically brought in for special teams. They signed Nick McLeod at corner off the Giants practice squad about, I don't know, was it 4 to 6 weeks ago? Mainly special teams, getting some run on defense as well. I don't think, special teams is a third of your team, right? Defense, special teams. It's the least important. I would never assign 33% for each of the three. Maybe you go 40, 40, 20. But it just hasn't been good enough since Schneider's been here. And things had to bottom out, right? Even for Nick Sorensen, and we're going to get into that. Things needed to bottom out the second half of the season, the last month of the season, to really put the exclamation point on changes being made. Special teams change, coach, kicker. I mean, a punter, there's a serious consideration of, do you bring Mitch Wishnowsky back? He's 32 years old with, I don't know if we want to call it chronic back issues, but he's missed time the past couple of years. Maybe they can go cheaper with the players and still get better. Now, if someone, I think the Commanders are on their fourth. I was watching a little bit of that Commander Cowboy game, and they're on their fourth kicker. I think it's Zane Gonzalez. And remember, was it last season or 2 seasons ago, they wound up trading a pick to Carolina for a kicker? And actually, no, it was last season, and they wound up drafting Jake Moody, so they released the Panthers kicker and I don't think wound up having to give a draft pick. I could be wrong about that, though. So you can find kickers, right? I mean, Brandon Aubrey for the Cowboys was found off the street. The kicker for the Vikings, the Cardinals, the Rams, they were either late round draft picks or undrafted rookie free agents coming out of college. They can find people to punt and kick. I don't think Mitch Wishnowsky is anything fantastic. I'd have to look at his salary cap numbers to see what they would gain by releasing him. But if it's say they release him and they gain $1 million and a half, that's money that will be put to another punter. So it's financially a wash. That's not a reason to keep somebody if you can upgrade your team, but could be a mild point of consideration. And as we know, Kyle's come out and said he doesn't want to lose games on special teams, yet they have, right? They lost the Rams game on special teams. They've made games closer. The Seahawk game in Seattle due to Laviska Shenault, taking that kick return back for a touchdown. Moody missed 9 of 20 field goals down the stretch. Kyle getting visibly pissed off. Was it the Rams game or a game before that or a game after that against Miami when he missed a field goal? Now, all these losses in retrospect have helped the team, right? I don't want a meaningless win late that gives the Niners a third place schedule or bumps them down from 11 to 14 in the draft order. I mean, 11, 14, that's minuscule when you think about it. Going from a third to fourth place schedule is important. The Niners have the easiest strength of schedule next year with players getting healthy. And we can't guarantee that they're going to stay healthy, but let's assume they start healthier than they were because McCaffrey will be back. Ayuk it's going to take. He's probably going to start out on the PUP list and not be ready till beginning or mid-October. They've lost games on special teams, or it's at the very least been far and away the weakest part of their team. You curl your toes every time Jake Moody went out there for a field goal. And Jacob, Cowings gained my confidence as the season went on. Do they look to upgrade from him at punt returner? They could. I mean, Cowing couldn't see the field on offense. And when he did see the field, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago, big gain by George Kittle against the Lions, nullified due to an offensive pass interference by Jacob Cowing. So if he's not in the doghouse, it's close to it. It's the offseason. He was a rookie. There's things that he's going to need to work on. But if everybody comes back, he's still the 4th or 5th wide receiver on the team. And how often is a 4th or 5th wide receiver going to see the field outside of major injuries? Work to be done on special teams. We know they need a new coach. Hallelujah. At least one problem has been addressed. And problem number 2, reportedly, as I'm filming this on Thursday morning Eastern Standard Time, there are sources saying that Nick Sorensen has been relieved of duties. Kyle and John will be speaking to the media 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. And I thought about waiting until after the the press conference to do the podcast to dissect what they're saying, but I don't think they're going to be saying anything substantial. They're going to say, get back to playing Niner defense. We want to stop the run. We want to play good pass defense. We want to get after the quarterback. I mean, I'm sure Kyle and John will get asked to, are you wed to a cover 3 wide 9? Are you going to bring someone in that's an experienced play caller? Because the last two, D'Amico Ryans and Nick Sorensen, were first-time defensive coordinators. And I'm sure they're going to say, we're going to cast a wide net. We're going to look at, they're going to be asking about Robert Saleh, and I'm going to get into that in a few minutes. I don't think they're not going to say anything definitively, and why would they? They don't want to be boxed into anything in question after the fact if they go a different route at DC. So I'm like, all right, let's just record and film the podcast early because it's not going to matter. There was some discussion and fear that Sorensen would be brought back. He did get a quasi-warm endorsement from Fred Warner during the season, from Nick Bosa during the season, who wanted to bring back as many of the players as they could. And he's like, people may be disappointed that it's not going to be looking, that much different. And that, the cover 3 with a new coordinator takes time to understand. If that's the case, then why are you hiring a rookie defensive coordinator? Why does it take time to understand when you have a good number of players that have been with the 49ers or played in a similar system elsewhere? You have 3 preseason games, and I know you're evaluating rookies and free agents. You have training camp. You have joint practices. I've said this before. If the learning just bled into September, I could understand that. I mean, hell, offenses across the league look like shit until the end of December, until you get into game 3 or 4. So I could understand that, but there was too much learning on the fly, too much stubbornness of playing just a vanilla rush 4, cover 7. I have some numbers that are obviously going to back that up. And let's just get into the numbers to see how bad it actually was. Guys, guys and gals, I know we watched every game, and it was bad. It looked bad. Even the good games were bad. Points allowed, 29th. Turnovers gained, 20th. 23rd in sacks, 31st in rushing touchdowns allowed. Sorensen allowed every team to score in the fourth quarter, whereas last year with much maligned Steve Wilks, his defense shut the opposing team out 11 times, 11 games. I think, and here's some stats in terms of, the last, 4+ games, they bottomed out. They cratered, and I think it made the decision easier for Kyle, which is a good thing. Bottoming out, cratering, losing however many of their last 7 or 8 games. Bring it on. Bring on the new DC. Bring on the new scheme potentially / hopefully. Bring on the 11th draft pick and bring on the 4th place schedule. I'm all about that. The defense gave up 35 or more points in 4 of their last 7 games. And in their last 3 games, they gave up 38.7 points per game, 404 yards per game, no takeaways their last 3 games, only 2 takeaways in their last 9, more than half the season. The latter half of the season, when they were fighting and scraping to get back into playoff contention, to try to climb back in the NFC West race, could not take the ball away. And their last 3 games, rushing yards allowed, 142, 166, and 152. Now, there's going to be no Nick Sorensen defenders or apologists listening or really anywhere. So anyone that may think, well, they had a decimated defense and they lost Hargrave for the season early on, and they didn't have Ward for a handful of games, and Greenlaw for most of the season, tried to come back, couldn't, got put back on IR. Obviously, Talanoa Hufanga. Was he missing some pieces? Yes. And I'm going to get into things, comparing other teams in a few minutes, but I don't think it excuses how bad the numbers I gave you, how bad they were. And I've called him Vanilla Nick Sorensen, which it works out that he's Caucasian because that's a shade of vanilla, right? And he never ventured off of vanilla. It was either vanilla, French vanilla, vanilla bean, maybe cook on the good games. Maybe it was cookies and cream, right? Maybe it was birthday cake, which was vanilla and rainbow colored sprinkles, marched in. Maybe it was cake batter, right? On a good game, but it was such a vanilla. They weren't defense. They weren't playing downhill. They were probably playing uphill. If anything, teams had the defense on roller skates, blowing the D line off the ball, not adjusting when teams were running the ball down their throat. No 5-man defense, like legit 5-man defensive lines. I'm not saying bringing a linebacker or a safety down, putting more beef on the line. I've said it before. I'm going to keep saying it. It's an alignment that gives Kyle Shanahan's running game problems. Why would that not be an alignment that gives other offensive coordinator running games problems as well? Rush 4, drop 7. Sorensen called blitzes at the third fewest rate in the NFL. Only Indianapolis and Jacksonville called fewer. And Sorensen brought 2 or more blitzes at by far the lowest rate in the NFL, 1.7% of the time. So if you're playing a game that's 60 snaps, he might be blitzing 1 or 2 times, 2 or more blitzers. Wildly unacceptable. Let's compare him to what Steve Wilks did in 2023. In 2024, by comparison, 11 fewer sacks, 11 fewer interceptions, gave up 35 more rushing yards per game. The only place of and more total yards, 22 and a half less passing yards per game. And if that had something to do with Sorensen being the secondaries coach, working with the secondary last year, or the fact that they were just running the ball down San Francisco's throat, didn't need to pass it all that well. Wilks was fired for being a better defensive coordinator, which was another reason why I didn't think Sorensen was going to survive. There's no way you can look fans in the eye just by himself what Sorensen put on tape this year and bring him back. But if you're going to fire Steve Wilks, being a crucial part of bringing a team to the Super Bowl and having a really good game plan for Mahomes for the first half, and then Mahomes just doing Mahomes stuff in the second half. And again, I keep saying Brock left that game late fourth quarter and in overtime with a 3-point lead, and the defense couldn't hold. And there were some head-scratching decisions from Steve Wilks. And whoever the next defensive coordinator is, he's going to be nitpicked apart, right? He's not going to call a perfect game all the time. I mean, hell, Steve Spagnuolo does not call a perfect game all the time. So this new DC needs to be given some grace, right? I mean, depending on what scheme they're going to be called and working with Kyle, and Kyle's going to have a pretty large thumbprint, if not a footprint, on what he wants this defense to be. Just one quick thing with Nick Sorensen. There's discussion that Kyle wants to keep him on staff. And that may be like a do-right move by Sorensen, because Kyle did reach out to, the Jets about Jeff Ulbrich interviewing. The Jets said no. They did reach out to Bill Belichick. So Nick Sorensen was at least the third choice. Brought Brandon Staley in as well. Is Brandon Staley going to be on the staff next year? We're going to talk about that in terms of DC options. What Nick Sorensen should not be is special teams coach at all. They need to bring in a seasoned, doesn't have to be a top 3, top 5 special teams coordinator, but someone who has experience doing it. Putting Sorensen in there without having the requisite knowledge or experience is just setting himself up to fail. And it's a unit, much like the defense, that's going to be under the microscope. It's going to be under a lot of scrutiny. Why would you move Sorensen from one hot plate to another? Doesn't make sense to me. He could be, assistant D-backs coach, defensive backs coach or something. He should not be anywhere near special teams, unless special teams at all. And if he's kept on the staff, if he's kept on the staff, that would be Kyle doing him a solid, just a matter of where he's going to fit. All right, DC options. I know a lot of fans are calling for Robert Saleh back. He's interviewing for the Jacksonville head coaching position. There's probably going to be another head coaching position that he will interview for, but I saw a report, I believe it was from Josina Anderson, that the 49ers were going to reach out and make him an offer. And again, I think that's Josina Anderson talking to other people in the league and other people's opinion about the 49ers, not a 49er employee, that, oh yeah, the Niners should reach out to Saleh and make him an offer. Again, that's not a source. It's not a source if it's someone's opinion. A source is someone in the organization, a decision maker, and I just don't think that's the case right now. However, it doesn't hurt to reach out. They should reach out to Robert Saleh and see if he has any interest in coming back. I mean, hell, they reached out to Bill Belichick last year to be the defensive coordinator. There was no chance in hell that Bill Belichick was going to be a defensive coordinator after being or still being the greatest NFL head coach of all time. And it's surprising that he took the North Carolina job, but he's the North Carolina Tar Heels head coach, not their defensive coordinator. So it doesn't hurt to ask. But to me, I believe it would be a step back for him, right? It would feel like, and a lot of people would probably say this in the media, in not to Saleh's face, because people like Grant Cohn are complete cowards, but it would feel like he's running back, to Shanahan, being back under Shanahan's wing, couldn't cut it as an offensive or as a head coach, was a defensive consultant for Matt LaFleur in Green Bay. It feels like it will be a step back, even if he got more money than he got the first time around in San Francisco, somewhere between what the Jets are paying him and what the Niners would have to offer him. And I'd have to figure out, do a little bit of research on that offset. If whatever the Niners would pay him, the Jets would not have to, I believe, but I can look into that. This would be a comfort hire for Kyle and fans. And I'm not sure he would be the best hire, honestly, right? He hasn't coached defense since 2020. So that's what, 17, 18, 19. So 4 years of defensive coordinator experience. So it's not nothing to sneeze at. 1 year of playoff experience in 2019, 3 games, including the Super Bowl. And I think fans would be comfortable with that. Kyle would be comfortable with that. That he would bring the same sort of scheme in, which may or may not be a problem. We're going to discuss that in a few minutes. But he's not as experienced, or I'll use the word sophisticated, as a play caller as some folks that are available. Is he a high energy guy? Would he bring some juice to the sidelines? Is he familiar with a lot of the players? Yes, yes, and yes. I'm not saying he would be a bad hire, but it feels like a run it back situation. And I think the Niners have made some choices in terms of personnel and hopefully some upcoming choices that they do not make in terms of free agent personnel, specifically Charvarius Ward, Talanoa Hufanga, and maybe even Dre Greenlaw, where they don't have this run it back mentality. What else can it not be? It cannot be an internal hire. It cannot be Brandon Staley at all. He had one good year, very good year. I think number one across the board or close to it with the Rams when they won the Super Bowl beating Cincinnati, went to the Chargers, and the defense there was crap for every year he was there. Markedly better now that Jim Harbaugh is the head coach. And yeah, Harbaugh is not the DC, but the head coach puts the stamp on basically all aspects of the defense. Like, we know Kyle likes to run the wide 9 and the cover 3. And we'll see with whoever comes in if they're going to run that. But Brandon Staley has 1 year of defensive play calling experience. To me, that's not enough. And whether he was overseeing, I'm sure he was overseeing Sorensen and had some input on the defense, it was shit. It's like, you want to fire the employee for doing a poor job. Well, how about the boss for doing a poor job also? And this doesn't go all the way up to Kyle. I'm not saying it ladders all the way up there, but if Staley was brought in as a quasi mentor, he's got to be gone too. It can't be Daniel Bullocks. It can't be someone on staff at all. It cannot be a rookie play caller. I'm hearing, seeing people on social media and they're saying, oh, bring someone like Navarro Bowman in. He's on Harbaugh's staff. No. Get out of your head former Niners. Even Ken Norton. I know he's a DC in Seattle and the Raiders. There's nothing about Ken Norton's resume that looks good. No. And of course, then you have the morons like, oh, Richard Sherman's available. Are you fucking serious? Get your head out of your ass. Cannot bring in a first-year defensive coordinator, whether he was a former Niner or not. We're at the point, and I've said it before, I know Kyle deferred offensive play calling duties to Bobby Slowick against Arizona Week 18. And if nothing else, it got George Kittle had a pretty good game. It got Patrick Taylor, of all people, over 100 yards. I still think he's just the guy, but if he's a number 4 running back on the team next year, I wouldn't be totally disgusted by it. Cannot be a first-time defensive coordinator because Kyle would not hire, if he were to hand over offensive coordinator play calling duties. I don't know or think with how much of a control freak he is, he would hand it over to a green first-time play caller. And I don't think he's going to hand over play calling duties anyway, so it doesn't matter. But names to throw out there and watch. And this is in no order. This is not my order of preference. I don't even know if I have a preference. And we'll talk about that after I list the names out. Jeff Ulbrich. Okay, he got fired, or not that he got fired. He's interviewing to be the Jets head coach. Why? In what universe, on what alternate earth would the Jets hire Jeff Ulbrich? Why are they offering that interview for him? Why is he taking it? It's a waste of everybody's time. Kyle reached out to Saleh last year. Saleh wouldn't, permit them to talk. He's going to be available, right? He's obviously not getting the Jets head coaching job. It's such a fucking waste of time, and just people are stupid. Gus Bradley got fired by Indianapolis as their defensive coordinator. Familiar with the cover 3. I don't know how much he's run the wide 9. Blitzed less than Nick Sorensen. Not sure how I feel about that. Okay. Dennis Allen, Saints head coach. We know he's a failure as a head coach. He's the defensive version of Norv Turner. Tried to be the head coach in Washington. Just was not. San Diego, I think also, right? Maybe I'm wrong on that. Not head coaching material. Dennis Allen is not a head coach material at all. And he should not get any head coach interviews at all. I think he's an okay defensive coordinator. I think they could do better. Again, none of the players I'm listing or coaches I'm listing I would be disgusted by or have a fit over. And I'm going to explain why once we go through them. Lou Anarumo from Cincinnati. He hangs his hat on beating Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, giving Patrick Mahomes difficulty. The Bengals defense markedly fell off the last couple of years. They have lost some talent. Since he's defensive coordinator for the past 6 years, he might be more name than game, but he's going to have better talent in San Francisco than he's had in Cincinnati. Mike Pettin, remember him? He used to be the head coach of the Browns. He's Minnesota's assistant head coach and linebacker coach. He has defensive coordinator experience. Could bring some aggressiveness to Kyle's defense, which I think is sorely needed. Matt Eberflus, failed head coach of the Bears, former defensive coordinator of the Indianapolis Colts. Could be an option. Wouldn't be wildly opposed to that. And if they get fired, or if Kyle puts out requests and be made available, Jim Schwartz, DC of the Browns, or Mike Zimmer, DC of the Cowboys. And those last two, I think there's a couple things that I think are important when evaluating the next DC. To me, let it be someone that really has no chance of being a defensive coordinator for the next, 2 to 4 years. I'm sorry, head coach. No head coaching opportunities the next 2 to 4 years. I think Jim Schwartz falls under that. I think Mike Zimmer falls under that. I think Christ, Dennis Allen for sure. Actually, probably everybody on this list: Ulbrich, Bradley, Allen, Lou Anarumo, Mike Pettin, Matt Eberflus, Schwartz, and Zimmer. All are probably not attractive head coaches in the next, say, at least 2 years. If any one of these defensive coordinators turns the Niners around significantly next year in 2025, they make a deep playoff run, get to the Super Bowl, win the Super Bowl. Of course, then coordinators get poached. The Niners are fortunate. You haven't never talked about this. They're fortunate that Kyle calls the plays because they've been so successful since 2019. They would be losing an OC every year. And yeah, they did lose Mike McDaniels and is Bobby Slowick the Houston Texans OC? I'm getting confused. So they have lost people. So I want to apologize if I misspoke about Slowick being the play caller against Arizona. He did turn over the play calling duties to somebody. And someone may look at this list and say, well, they're also Rans. Like, no one's going to say they're too old. I mean, with age comes experience. Wouldn't you want Vic Fangio right now, what he did to the Eagles defense? And I don't know if Kyle, reached out to him. And if he didn't, because this whole cover 3, wide 9, rush 4, drop 7 shit, what has it led to this year? Pretty decent pass defense, horrible run defense, and really no pressures on the quarterback, no creativity, no putting the quarterbacks in a bind. To me, I don't care, for the most part, who the defensive coordinator is. I really don't. I mean, it just cannot be Brandon Staley, Daniel Bullocks, or anyone internal. And I'm not against a Robert Saleh DC. I'm not at all. I just think if I were him, I would view it as a step back, like I'm running back to daddy. Whoever comes in, and it can't be a rookie. It just can't be a linebacker coach and another staff. It's got to be someone that's been through the fire, someone with experience, potentially has playoff experience. If Kyle still wants to run, cover 3 principles, fine. I want to see someone put their fucking stamp on the defense. I want to see this goddamn defense play downhill. I want to see aggressiveness. I don't want to see blitzing to the point of what the Vikings do, but I want to see quarterbacks somewhat confused, quarterbacks under duress, nearly as much, if not more, than Brock was under duress this year, whether that was O-line issues or not being able to pick up blitzes or whatever the case may be. What we saw Brock had to deal with is what I want to see other quarterbacks deal with next year. You want to tell me you're playing, old mottos, all gas, no brakes. You want to tell me you're violent. You want to tell me you're playing downhill. Show it. Enough of this bend but don't break horse shit. And it goes back, and I've heard from, I read a lot of things and reading a lot of morons' takes on Twitter, and a lot of people out there saying, oh, well, it's a personnel issue. They don't have as much talent as they did in 2019. Yeah, I guess now we can say that 2019's D-line of Ford, Bosa as a rookie, Armstead, and Buckner was a special D-line. Like, they were getting pressure, getting sacks, collapsing the pocket, getting QB hits. I will say also, though, that the number of sacks that the 2019 defense rang up was the same number as last year's defense under Steve Wilkes. But it felt different. It felt more aggressive. It felt like they were controlling the line of scrimmage more. And if you want to give a lot of credit to Robert Saleh in his 3rd year, which, again, I'm not against the Saleh hire, actually be fine with it. I just don't think he is going to be fine with it. But when people say it's a personnel issue, there's still more talent on this defense than people are giving credit for. You have Bosa and Floyd at defensive end. Bosa, I think, at 9.5 sacks. Floyd is about, 7.5 or 8. And Bosa obviously missed 3 games. Pick one of your defensive tackles. Let's say Malik Collins. I don't know or think Javon Hargrave's going to be back. We'll see about Jordan Elliott, Evan Anderson. He's played well, but they can do better. You still have Fred Warner at linebacker. You have a solid to very good pairing at cornerback of Demo and Renardo Green, and Mustafa as an ascending player at safety that we know is going to be on the team next year. That's a pretty good, we'll call it core. We're not going to say like core from a youth standpoint, but core in terms of established. And Mustafa's young, but Players you definitely can build around. Starters, and I named 7 of them. Let's take Collins off the list. 6 starters that you can build around out of 11 on defense. Okay? When you look at other teams, other defenses, I'm going to go through top 7 in yards and top 7 in points. Tell me these teams have better personnel on defense than the Niners do. Eagles, all right, they have some youth with Jalen Carter on the line. Then you have, the rookie duo at corner. And I don't know players from every single team. These are the players that jump out to me. Tennessee, I don't know if I can name a player on Tennessee's defense. Number 2 in yards allowed. The Jets, all right, DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner, Mosley at linebacker. Their D-line wildly underperformed even when Hassan Reddick came back. The Dolphins, Jalen Ramsey, struggled to name really anybody else. Number 4 in yards allowed. The Texans, now you have a good cornerback in Stingley, and you have Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter on the line, so you're obviously going to be generating pressure. They obviously have some players. Packers, I mean, you have, we're going to say Jair Alexander, who's on IR, Xavier McKinney, who they got from the Giants. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in terms of yards allowed. And the Broncos, Patrick Surtain and Nick Bonito are the 2 that jump out. That's more, Denver feels more like scheme than, great players 1 through 11. In top 7 in points, all right, the Chargers between Bosa and Mack, they're getting good play out of rookie corners, Derwin James at safety. You got the Eagles again. You got the Chiefs. I'm sorry, the Eagles again. You have the Broncos. You have the Chiefs, 4th in points allowed. Obviously, you have some good players. That's more Steve Spagnuolo than anything. The Vikings, you have Harrison Smith at safety. You have Stephon Gilmore, an older player at corner. Jonathan Greenard was basically a swap at defensive end for Danielle Hunter. That's more scheme with Brian Flores than talent. The Packers and the Lions, 7th in points allowed, and they were dealing with all sorts of injuries this year. And that's more scheme, Aaron Glenn, than talent based on the injuries. I'm not going to say the Niners' talent on defense are better than every single one of these teams that I mentioned. They might be better than half the teams I mentioned, or slightly more than half. So better or comparable to the teams that I mentioned, right? And the Niners are not in the top 7 or top 10 in yards or points. Points, they're in like the 20 to 25s, completely bottomed out. Yards bottomed out because of how bad the run defense is. This is more a schematic and coaching issue than personnel. I tremendously believe that. And while Kyle is enamored with the cover 3, I think it has to go away. That was a defense that was dominant 12 years ago with Seattle's Legion of Boom. They had a couple of good years of it, right? Like 2012, 2013, they got to the Super Bowl, and then it started to fall off. And maybe it had like, say, three good years. And they had a lot of good players at every single level between Sherman and Cam Chancellor, Bobby Wagner, of course. They had good players on the D-line. That was it's a defense from a decade ago. Not to say that some principles of it cannot be used, of course. But I keep saying, let's look at the defenses now schematically that give Kyle problems. It's Jim Schwartz, it's Brian Flores in Minnesota, and it's Steve Spagnuolo in Kansas City. And Steve Spagnuolo gives everybody problems. And Brian Flores does a nice job against most teams, week 18 at Detroit, notwithstanding. And Jim Schwartz, the whole Browns team has been shit this year, but they were a top 3 defense last year. What 2 of those 3 coaches have in common is a significant amount of pressure, aggressiveness, literally playing downhill. And Spagnuolo is more of the wizard, schematically putting you in bad situations, 3rd down, sending timely blitzes, understanding how to get home. Again, the Chiefs on defense, I don't think they're world beaters 1 to 11 personnel wise. None of the teams I mentioned are. It is the scheme. The wide nine is getting run on. The wide nine is not generating pressure. The front four, Kyle and John, just inject some truth serum or whatever you need to understand your front four is not nearly as good as it's been in the past. You know why the Vikings have a shit ton of sacks, and they have sacks coming from the linebacker level, the D line? Because when you're sending 6 or 7 people, someone's going to get home, and the someone who gets home doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be Bosa or Floyd. It can come from a linebacker, it can come from a corner, it can come from a safety who could have 3 or 4 sacks. Minnesota, I don't have the exact number, in front of me, but a top 3 team in terms of sacks in the NFL. And it's spread out. They don't have, the one dominant 17, 18 sack guy like the Bengals have when Lou Anarumo was there before he got fired, and Trey Hendrickson. 17 and a half or 18 sacks, something monstrous. It's great to have that player, and they have that player in Bosa. But I say this, and I like Nick Bosa a lot, and I'm glad he's on the Niners. He is someone that you game plan for, but he's not a game wrecker. Myles Garrett's a game wrecker. J.J. Watt's a game wrecker. You want to throw Trey Hendrickson in there? He's a game wrecker. Nick Bosa, and he's had really good games. I'm not saying he hasn't. But he is not even a poor man's Bruce Smith or Charles Haley or Reggie White. I mean, obviously Reggie White's an all-time great. I don't even know if he's as much of a game wrecker as Aldon Smith was in his prime. Or Justin Smith. And it's nothing against Bosa. You can help out your Bosas and your Floyds and your Tor Gross-Matos and Hargrave if he's on the team by sending more than they can block. Not every play, not half the time, but not 1.7% of the time, which is what Nick Sorensen dialed up. Doesn't mean Bosa's guaranteed 13, 14, 15 sacks by blitzing more. Those sacks could go to someone else. It might not be a sack. It might be a hurry, a throwaway, an intentional grounding, an interception, a third down stop. We don't have to quantify, and I still think pressures are just a shit stat in general. You don't have to quantify how good the defense is with takeaways and sacks and turnovers, fumble recoveries. We know they were worse under Sorensen than Steve Wilkes, but you got to get off the field on third down. You got to make it harder for these top 10, top 12 quarterbacks to go down the field because they're going to figure the defense out in the second half. They figured Sorensen. I'm surprised they didn't figure Sorensen out earlier. A lot of these teams, they would play relatively well in the first half. You would see the decline in the third quarter, and the fourth quarter was a complete shit show, especially for your D line because they're fucking gassed because they're not getting help. They're not getting help from any other level of defense to get to the quarterback. It's just expected, even though you're rotating in, it's just expected your front four should get there. Well, they haven't. They haven't consistently for a couple years. Again, last year, just as many sacks as 2019. But the tenor of the defense was completely different. So in sum, experienced defensive coordinator. If you want to bring principles of the cover 3, cool. Think about the wide 9 because it's not working as well as you think, and get more aggressive. There's too much talent on this defense. I'm not going to say they're the most talented individual defense in the league. Certainly not going to say that. But I think personnel-wise, do you want to say what? They're a top 7? Top 5 person? Let's just say 7. Let's just make it. I don't want to get crazy. Top 7 personnel unit in the league. And if you've been listening to the podcast or watching one, thank you very much. I'm going to sound like a broken record. The individual pieces are greater than the whole. It's got to be the other way around. That's why defenses like the Titans, like the Vikings, like the Dolphins, like the Lions who are banged up, when the scheme is sound, it enables the stars to really shine, but it also elevates the role players, the not stars, the average to above average players, makes them better. Everybody eats. Everybody eats. Under Sorensen, no one was eating other than the D-line, and most games they were leaving hungry. Now, Brock on his extension really quick. If you guys didn't see this, A lot of people were interviewed, McCaffrey, Kittle, Warner, like everybody, because they were cleaning out their lockers. And Brock was asked about his extension. And here's what he said, quote, "I want to be able to handle business the right way and do it in a respectable manner and get back to my team as fast as I can to get going, to get better, to grow together." Brock's a leader. He's going to say the right things. He's obviously not going to, point fingers. I mean, handle my business the right way. If you want to say he's throwing shade at Debo or Ayuk or Bosa, all right. I mean, we all know, media members, Niner players, Niner staff, we all know that shit drags on through the summer unnecessarily, right? We all know that. He's not going to take to social media. I don't think he's going to personally get a market resetting deal. I don't think his APY, average per year, is going to be over 60. I don't think it's going to even be 60. I think it's going to be in the 50s. And when he was pressed, would you hold out, for OTAs, when asked about the possibility of missing anything or mini camps during negotiations, here was Purdy's quote, quote, "I'm not really sure as of now, but like I said, I want to get back to work as soon as I can with the guys. So hopefully something would get done sooner rather than later." I don't think anything gets done this month. I mean, that would be awesome. Why not? Just start negotiating. I don't know the quarterbacks that are up for extensions this offseason, but if there are a few, you might as well get in early, San Francisco, to get Brock in a little bit more of a deal. Now, obviously, we've talked about it a lot. The numbers are there in the mid-50s between Tua and Goff and Trevor Lawrence, Jalen Hurts, Jordan Love. He's in that tier. I don't care what... It doesn't matter what anybody says. Just look at the resumes, look at the numbers. Since Brock has come into the league, and I'm going to talk more about this in future podcasts when we talk about free agency, and I'm going to rank, offensive and defensive Niner free agents, who they should be asking back. Since he's come into the league, Brock is top 7 in passing yards, touchdowns, completion percentage, and QBR and yards per attempt. Top 7. And he did not play a full season in 2022, his rookie year, where he threw 13-5. Top 7. And you're going to tell me you don't want to pay him like a top 7 quarterback? Guys, it's not Brock's responsibility to worry about the Niners cap. That's on Lynch and Parag Marath. That's not his responsibility or his agent's responsibility. Obviously, his agent wants to get him as much money as possible because the agent gets a percentage of that. The Niners are going to have to worry about the cap, and the average per year doesn't really matter. It's all about the guaranteed money and the signing bonus and all that good stuff. But why is it that people are going to come down on Brock for being in a way, the steward or the custodian of how his contract affects the Niners cap? What about Bosa? He got a big money deal. Fred Warner got a big money deal. Kittle, for his position relative, big money deal. Ayuk at $30 million per. McCaffrey got a raise. Trent Williams got a raise. Debo's on the last year of his contract, and his cap hit isn't bad this year, but it's bad in 2026. Same as Javon Hargrave. Hargrave got a big money deal. Why is it only Brock? Why is Brock the reason? Public enemy number one for some shitty fans, uninformed fans, for a lot of non-tent creators or biased people in the media, that Brock's the reason why the Niners are not going to be able to keep some people. It's not Brock. It's not only Brock's fault. Everybody else who ate financially, Bosa, Warner, Kittle, Ayuk, McCaffrey, Trent Williams, Javon Hargrave, Debo Samuel, that in some they take away from others. In some, their contracts, and obviously as the years go on, the cap numbers generally escalate. So Bosa's cap hit's going to be more in 2025 than 2024. McCaffrey's is actually pretty reasonable. Ayuk's is going to go up. Debo has a huge dead cap hit in 2026 that they have to figure out, which is the reason why they may actually extend him. And I know a lot of people aren't going to be a fan of that. I don't know how I feel about it. I want to think about that a little bit more. Juwan Jennings, nearly 1,000-yard receiver, got thrown out for blocking his ass off, finished 25 yards shy of 1,000. I saw people saying that the Niners have a bad culture. The Niners are out of control. That's why Jennings didn't get 1,000 yards. Well, Jennings could have not blocked like a madman the second time, right? And I know the cornerbacks responded to it, but Jennings, and I'm not faulting Jennings. He played through the whistle, but once you get your first personal foul, it's okay to take your foot off the gas a little bit. If 1,000 yards meant that much to him, I don't know if it does, but 2025 is the last year of his contract. Now the Niners may have to negotiate. And if I'm Juwan Jennings' agent, I'm saying my client put up more yards than Deebo Samuel has since 2021. I mean, is Juwan Jennings going to get $25 million a year? I don't think he should. But if you're your agent, that's what you're going to say. And if that's the case, then the Niners aren't going to extend him. But it's not just Brock and the team. A lot of people use the excuse of, well, if you pay the quarterback, you can't pay everybody else. Well, they paid Bosa, right? That Warner's going to get extended. Kittle's going to get extended. Ayuk got extended. Trent hopefully is here for another couple of years. McCaffrey's going to be here for another couple of years. You have the young players, right, that are hopefully going to take the step up between Purdy and Mustafa and Green. Hopefully D. Winters takes that next step. Yetur Gross-Matos is under contract for another year. It's pretty much built already. So I think the fallacy of you can't build a team around a quarterback that's making a whole lot of money, it's pretty much built. Do they have holes in the walls and maybe need part of a new ceiling and maybe the kitchen needs a little bit of a redo? Yeah, but the house is built. The house might be a little top heavy. So John Lynch and company are going to have to earn their paychecks in the draft. I think right now they're scheduled to have 10 picks, hit on half of them, hit on 5 or 6, some good mid-level free agents, and be judicious in re-signing your own, which is why I can Charvarius Ward is gone. I can understand why Greenlaw and Hufanga don't come back. And I always say, like, you're at the point now where you could pay one player at a certain position, not two. Ayuk got paid. Deebo's going to be gone if he's on the team in 2025 after 2025. Bosa got paid. No other DN is making a lot of money. Warner got paid. I don't think they're going to pay anyone else at linebacker a lot of money. You obviously only pay one tight end, one wide receiver, one offensive lineman in Trent Williams. They'll bring in free agents on the offensive line, but no one's making Trent Williams money. They're not going to pay someone like a Chris or a Drew Dahlman, whoever the Atlanta Falcons center is, $12 million or $15 million a year at center or guard. They're just not going to do that, guys. They'll bring bodies in on the O-line, but they're not going to pay heavy money like that. They probably max out at maybe 5 or 6 for a certain offensive lineman, $5 or $6 million a year. More to come about free agency stuff and how I'm viewing the offseason. But quickly, some housekeeping notes. They did sign over a dozen players to future contracts. Let's go through them. And I'll have some thoughts on some. Quarterback Tanner Mordecai. Offensive line, Drake Nugent, Isaac Alarcon, Jalen McKenzie, Sebastian Gutierrez, and Zach Johnson. Tight end, Mason Pline. Wide receivers, Tariq Owens, Trent Taylor, Russell Gage, and Isaiah Hodgins. Defensive linemen, DNs, Jonathan Garvin and Taron Jackson, and cornerback Chase Lucas and safety Jalen Mahoney. So the ones that jump out to me as interesting, real quick, Tanner Mordecai. I think he has a real chance of being the number 3 quarterback on the roster next year. There is no way the Niners are drafting quarterback early. Anybody that's out there that thinks that, and I know it's not you guys because I pride myself on having a really smart, listener and viewership. They're not drafting. And even if they draft someone they don't have a 5th round pick, say the 6th or 7th round, that's not the backup. Kyle Shanahan in no universe would have a rookie quarterback as the backup to Brock Purdy. It's going to be another veteran, whether they give Josh Dobbs another look. Hopefully not Brandon Allen. I think I've seen enough. Plus he has 0 mobility. Josh Dobbs gave us a Josh Dobbs game in Arizona, right? 3 touchdowns, 3 turnovers, 2 through the air, 1 rushing touchdown, 2 interceptions, 1 fumble, but he has playmaking ability. It probably drives Kyle Wild in terms of the turnovers, but again, doesn't matter if they win or loss type of game, but he has some playmaking ability. Is someone like Mac Jones, who's under his last year in Jacksonville, does he come over as the backup? I mean, Andy Dalton, there's going to be options. It's going to be a veteran, and Tanner Mordecai has a real shot of being the number 3. Tight end Mason Pline. The Niners need a viable tight end too badly. Just have another option on the field, especially if Kittle gets hurt. They're playing with a hand tied behind their back because whoever the tight end is not going to have the trust of Kyle or Brock unless they start force feeding him. I'm not saying Mason Pline's the answer, but he could be in the mix, especially because Eric Saubert and Jake Tonjes are free agents. At receiver, Russell Gage, he's a legit receiver in this league. So he's under contract. He's going to be, unless the Niners cut any of these players, they're under contract to come to camp in July. Isaiah Hodgins was with the Giants, played significant snaps with the Giants a couple of years ago, was on their practice squad, I believe. Niners signed him, 6'3", 200, big receiver, can run. Bigger receiver than Russell Gage. I mean, Russell Gage, I think, is maybe is he around 6 feet tall? But options, two viable options that could be there, number 4 or number 5, and maybe higher if they decide to move on from Deebo Samuel. Jonathan Garvin played the end in this league as an op. Again, I think they keep, obviously, Bosa, but Floyd and Yatir Gross-Matos. And then for defensive ends 4 and 5, I think they draft one that becomes DN 4. And defensive end 5, you could have a free-for-all battle. Jonathan Garvin, Sam Okiwanu, Robert Beal, and Drake Jackson if he's healthy. Right? The pass rush needs to be revamped, but I don't think they're going wholesale. I think Yator and Floyd are still on the team next year. And safety, Jalen Mahoney. There's going to be an opportunity for somebody at safety. I don't think Talanoa Hufanga comes back. I don't think they're going to give him anywhere close, or they're going to want to give him anywhere close to $10 million a year, whatever that signing bonus looks like. Remember, Budda Baker, although a better safety at this point than Talanoa Hufanga, got, $16 million per year from Arizona. They could draft somebody. They could bring in a veteran to play alongside Malik Mustafa, but Talanoa Hufanga and Mustafa feel like the same player. While Hufanga has good instincts, he takes bad angles. He is not a center fielder or a ball hawk. And even though the Niners, Sorensen's not there anymore, so maybe a new defensive coordinator has a new opinion on this or a new outlook. They want their safeties to play interchangeably. That's fine, but let's bring in someone that is a playmaker, that can play single high, that can drop down and cover, that has a nose for the football. I don't think Mustafa or right now is that. And I don't think really Talanoa Hufanga is that either. So I'm okay moving on there. And then they can go relatively inexpensive in free agency. They don't have to spend $15 million on a safety that fits their system. It could be, in the $5 to $7 million range. Or it could be a draft pick. Lot to figure out between now and end of April, or now in mid-March when free agency officially begins. But we're going to go into that more in future podcasts. But that concludes the Niners podcast for today and this week. Like always, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to make us part of your listening routine. The Niners turning the page on Brian Schneider and Nick Sorensen. I'll probably have reactions to the press conference in next week's podcast, unless I decide to do something over the weekend. I'm not sure. But the Niners defensive coordinator search was not a short one last time. So probably next week at the absolute earliest would be when the Niners, end of next week, the absolute earliest would be when the Niners would introduce their next DC. We'll see how much is leaked in terms of, or announced in terms of who is interviewing to be the defensive coordinator. That's usually more of a head coaching announcement than OC or DC, but hopefully we get some news and nuggets there, and it'll be more to talk about in the next podcast as we also dive into the beginning of Niners free agency, who to potentially bring back on offense and defense. But between now and then, playoffs are underway. Sadly, the Niners are not part of it, but hopefully it's a good and needed rest and recharge offseason. The Niners getting an extra month to recuperate, and they had a lot of people on IR, so that can only be beneficial. But between now and we speak again, 2 games on Saturday, 3 games on Sunday, 1 game on Monday night. Enjoy the football. Whatever else you are doing, stay happy, healthy, and safe, and we will talk soon. Take care.